All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to finish off the section on memory by talking about amnesia. So, by definition, amnesia is the inability to store or retrieve memory traces. So, there will be two types I will be talking about. One is called retrograde amnesia, the other one is called anterograde amnesia. So, we'll talk about those in the next slide, but for right now, we want to talk about some of the different reasons as to why people may develop amnesia. The most common of these is going to be a head trauma. This could be some type of accident or maybe a concussion that you suffer from. So it could be, getting into a car accident, hitting your head on the windshield or on the steering wheel. Maybe you're playing sports and get hit in the head. Those are good examples of how this could happen. Depending on the severity of the head trauma, it could be permanent memory loss or temporary memory loss. Once again, we'll talk about that in the next slide. We also have strokes. So whenever a person has a stroke, they lose oxygen to the brain, which can cause brain damage. And so depending on the location of the stroke and where the oxygen has been depleted, that can cause various types of brain impairments. But in many cases, it could lead to memory loss. Obviously, drug and alcohol abuse can cause serious memory problems. For example, people who are chronic alcoholics who develop what's called Korsakoff syndrome will develop severe amnesia. But also you could have similar types of problems when people are meth addicts or heroin addicts, for example. Also viral bacterial infections. So this would be like meningitis, encephalitis, those types of infections. And becoming more common these days would be neurological illnesses such as Alzheimer's disease. So what happens here is that as the disease progresses, more and more brain cells get destroyed in the memory centers and you start to have memory loss. What's kind of interesting about this, though, is that what they're finding out with a lot of the new research is that with late stage Alzheimer patients, they can remember memories from way back, from their childhood, but recent memories they have problems with. So it's kind of interesting how the memory system operates and how different types of neurological problems could cause different types of damage to the brain. So anyways, so those are the common reasons why people may have amnesia. Now, let's explain to you the two different types. Think about a timeline going across a continuum, and at some point you're going to have your brain injury right here. The first type of amnesia we have is called retrograde amnesia. Retro meaning prior to or before. So this is going to be a loss of memory prior to the brain injury. So for example, if you're playing in a football game, you may suffer what's called graded retrograde amnesia. This would be more of a temporary memory loss, and this is going to be much more common than the permanent retrograde amnesia. So say you're playing in the game, you get hit in the head in the fourth quarter. You may not remember anything that happened after lunch, for example. Or maybe you may not remember everything that happened after you woke up that morning. So it'll be a period of time prior to the brain injury where you can't remember any information. Now, what's going to happen is that as your memory starts to come back, some of those memories may gradually come back also. But there will be a period of time probably where you can't remember any information. That may be due to a temporary loss of consciousness, or sometimes you'll see these players will be sitting on the bench after they get hit in the head. They're just kind of staring out into space. That's because they're not fully conscious at that point. And so they're not really processing information very well, and they're not storing memories. So that's why they would still have that type of permanent memory loss. But in the case of retrograde amnesia, this would be loss of all information prior to the brain injury. So a good example of this would be the movie Overboard with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. So the original, not the remake. The remake was no good, but the original was pretty cool. And so what happened in this movie is that Goldie Hawn was like a rich woman, and she was on her yacht with her family. There was a storm. Somehow she got thrown overboard. It hit her head, and she has amnesia. Then Kurt Russell is this poor guy living somewhere in Louisiana, I guess it was. And he finds her. There's a report about this missing woman. He finds out she doesn't have any memory of who she was. And so he said that she was his wife. And so it was kind of interesting. I won't give you the whole story, but you got to go watch it. It's kind of a funny movie. But anyways, so that's retrograde amnesia. Now, anterograde amnesia would be the loss of memories after, antero meaning after the brain injury. So this is where you can't form any new memories after the brain injury. So In this section, we're going to be doing a short homework assignment on patient HM. You're going to watch a video on him. He suffered from severe epilepsy. And when he had his epilepsy, there wasn't an effective way to treat it besides having surgery to his brain. And so they basically had to destroy the area that was causing his seizure activity. That happened to be his temporal lobes, including his hippocampus. And so they had to remove his whole left temporal lobes. This made him severely amnesic. And in fact, he had a surgery, I believe, like in 1952. Until he died, he couldn't remember anything new after his brain surgery. So that'd be pterograde amnesia. So once again, if you watch movies, a good example would be 50 First Dates, or another cool movie was Memento. That was a cool one also. So you'll see a lot of these types of movies out there. They're kind of fun to watch, and at least you'll have an idea what they're talking about with these different types of amnesias. So anyways, so we have retrograde and pterograde. Now, patient HM, as we mentioned, he suffered from severe epilepsy. They removed his left temporal lobe, including his hippocampus. So that's why the hippocampus, as we mentioned in chapter 2, is the area that's designated for the formation of memories. It's not the storage site because he still has memories prior to his brain injury, but he couldn't form any new memories after that. Now, he does have some awareness of what's going on around him. Like he'll be able to recognize his doctor because he sees her every day, but he can't remember her name, for example. So it's kind of an interesting type of problem to have. Here's a picture of where it's located. But when you watch the video, it'll give you more information. And also, there's more information in the Revel chapter. And so what happened after his surgery? No more seizures, which was good, but severe pterograde amnesia, some retrograde amnesia. He had some short-term memory problems if distracted. So he could play a game, he could play checkers, but if you distracted him, he couldn't remember what he was doing just like 30 seconds ago. Or say you're playing cards, he goes to the bathroom, he comes back, doesn't remember what he was doing. He has normal intelligence. And so he has memories prior to his brain injury. All his prior knowledge is still stored. And what's interesting about this is that they learned a lot about the memory system from patients like patient HM who had severe amnesia. And one of the agreements that he had is that he received treatment from the medical center where he was located, as long as he did research with Scoville and Milner, two famous researchers who did a lot of research with them. So you'll see all that in the video. But anyways, so what they found out is that there's different types of memories that we do have. So one type of memory is called episodic memory. This is memory for personal experiences or events that happened in a person's past. So when you answer the question, I remember when I went on vacation to the beach. I remember when I went to Disneyland. I remember when I graduated from high school. Those are all episodic memories. Now, patient HM has episodic memories, but only for memories prior to his brain injury. So, for example, if you ask him what he did for vacation last summer, he's not going to tell you what he did in 2019. He's going to tell you what he did in 1951. That's how strange this whole syndrome is. And you could just imagine what it must be like to be patient HM, because when he wakes up in the morning, he probably thinks it's still 1952. He probably thinks he's still, 20 years old or so. So can you imagine what must happen when he looks in the mirror and sees this old guy? So it's kind of an interesting type of memory disorder to have. Next, we have semantic memory. This is memory for general knowledge or meaning. I know that. So I know that the capital of California is Sacramento. I know that the President of the United States is Donald Trump. That's general knowledge. Once again, if you ask patient HM, he does have semantic memory, but only for memories that happened prior to his brain injury. So once again, if you ask him who is President of the United States, he can tell you. He's not going to tell you who's president today, but he's going to remember who was president back in 1951. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are a history buff, I believe that was right after World War II. That ended in 1945. Roosevelt died, so I believe Truman took over for a while, but then a great war general, Dwight D. Eisenhower, became president. So I believe it was Eisenhower who was president back in 51. So let me know if I'm wrong. If not, then we'll go with Eisenhower. Finally, we have procedural memory. This is memory for a sequence of events, skills, or knowledge of how to do things. I know how. So I know how to build a birdhouse. I know how to play poker. I know how to ride a bicycle. Those are all procedural memories. And what's interesting about this type of memory is that patient HM has this. He can have procedural memory for recent events. For example, if he never knew how to play poker before his brain injury, you could teach him how to play poker today. Now, he can't tell you the rules of poker because that would be semantic. He couldn't tell you when he learned how to play poker because that would be episodic, but he could play poker. So here's an interesting example. Suppose patient HM didn't know how to drive a car before his brain surgery. Today, you could teach him how to drive a car, and he could drive a car. You could actually take him to the DMV. He could pass a driving test, the actual driving test. Turn left, turn right, parallel park, all that. But he would not be able to pass the written test because that's going to require semantic memory. So he couldn't tell you the rules of driving. He couldn't tell you when or who taught him how to drive, but he could drive. So we don't have just one type of memory. We have several different types of memories. And depending on what type of memory impairment you may have, that will lead you to have different types of memories that you do have and other types of memories that you don't have. So the memory system is a lot more complicated than we initially thought. And as we do more research, especially today with MRIs and fMRIs and stuff like that, we're learning a lot more about the memory system. So once again, I hope you guys enjoy the video on patient HM. Let me know if you have any questions over any of the assignments for this chapter. We will go over all this in our weekly Zoom meetings. But also, as always, if you guys have questions, you can send me an email. You can post a question on Pronto. You can post a question on the Q&A discussion board. And if you want to have a Zoom office hour with me, just let me know and I can arrange that for you. All right, so have fun this week, you guys. And I guess I'll enjoy grading the papers when they come in. But anyways, have a great